Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to Radio Wasteland. Tonight's guests are Kara and I. This is one of those experimental shows that probably just shouldn't be done. What Kara and I are going to do is we're going to discuss the state of the world today, this world of
we're
murder hornets.
We're going to swerve wildly out of our lane.
Right, world of murder hornets and conspiratory presidents and so on and so forth. Because maybe a lot of you don't know, but Kara is a lot younger than I am. You're still 25?
I'm 27.
You're still
25. I was 25 when we started doing this show 3 years ago.
Okay, all right. Look at you all grown up. And I'm 40-something, maybe 45, maybe 44. I don't know.
Okay, well, if you don't know your age either, I feel better.
No, I don't. But I have more of an excuse.
Everyone's a lot of years. Can't keep track after a certain point.
So I've been saying to myself, hey, maybe this isn't a great idea to do this show, because the way I see it is you're going to get hated on by the more conservative older listeners, and I'm going to get cancel cultured. This is the way that I see this ending up, is that both of us are bad guys.
Likely.
On the flip side, it does make both of us the good guy to the other side. So maybe that works.
And honestly, I think the listeners already, I'm like, what do they call it? In professional wrestling, the heel or something, that's, I feel like that's basically my function on the show already, because I'm like a crazy communist, and our listeners are like centrist ish, maybe. I don't really know. But probably not. Yeah, probably not as left wing as I am.
You're right.
So
okay, and to be fair, I'm going to answer any one of the questions that you answer as well. I'm not.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good.
But okay, so first off, Kara, what political box would you put yourself into?
I'd call myself a socialist.
You'd call yourself a straight-up socialist?
Yes, I would. But worth noting, I'm sort of sitting here standing in for the youngins today. That's not where the youngins today are. I'm considerably to the left of that. I would say in people who are my age and who are also LGBT, there's a very good chance that they are straight-up socialists like I am. But people who are not LGBT but who are my age probably do not think the way I do on a lot of the stuff we're going to be talking about.
All right, so just to make it clear to the audience, are you a capitalist?
No.
You're completely a socialist. There is no capitalism.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of social democrats call themselves socialists, but that's not where I'd put myself. Although, honestly, like social democracy, what's practiced in Finland, Denmark, et cetera, that's a form of capitalism. It's basically just heavily regulated capitalism. Now, personally, I don't think that is too bad, but I still wouldn't call myself a social democrat. I would call myself a socialist, because I would prefer a system that had no private property whatsoever.
So what's the difference between a socialist and a communist?
Branding.
Just branding. So you're a Democratic.
I'm basically, communist. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
you believe in democracy.
Yes, I do. The democratic is a key point there, and I probably should have brought that up. I'm not a fan of totalitarian states, whether they're left-wing, right-wing, whatever. I think totalitarianism is bad.
Just to break apart the word, and this irritates me a lot of the time when people talk about communists, they're all, commie this, commie that. There has never been a large country on this planet that was an actual communism. China, Russia, these countries are not communisms.
Yeah. I feel like it's a little more complicated, though, because Vietnam right now, I would say, is about as socialist as you can be while still existing in a global capitalist economy. They export stuff, they trade, because literally have to, but they're basically a socialist country, and I think are a decent example of what a socialist country is or should look like.
Then why don't you get out of our country and just go to Vietnam already?
Well, because I don't speak the language, and because it's much poorer. Like, ideally, I would like to live in a country that is as rich as the U.S., but is also socialist. Like, there's no question their standard of living is lower on a lot of things, because, no surprise, they're a much poorer country than we are. And I don't think they're a poorer country because they're socialist. I think they were a poorer country because they were colonized for hundreds of years and then torn by war for many more years. And,
sure. Yeah.
And right now they're doing about as well as they can for their size and the fact that capitalist countries don't particularly like them.
Yeah, so my answer to this is a tough one. I'm not sure what box to put myself in. Do you have any idea what box I should put me in? What would you consider me?
Well, I guess I don't really know. When I describe socialism, I just say basically I want the same world we live in right now. I just want every corporation replaced with a co-op, basically, and a couple other things. Like, I don't think landlords should exist. I think.
Now, is that co-op run by the government in a socialist fashion, or is that
not necessarily? In some conceptions of socialism, it is. Personally, I don't particularly like that. I'm more of a market socialist.
So there is some level of free market going on.
Yeah, I think the free market is good. I think you can have the free market in a socialist economy. I just think, if you work for a company, you should get some ownership of it. I think the way companies are run today, which arguably has a lot more effect on us than the way the government is run, is, not democratic at all. It's not democratic by design. And no one expects companies to be democratic, but I think they should be. Because I think, you can get fired for saying something on social media about your company. They have huge control over your lives. They have huge control over the world, over the resources, over the environment. So I think they should be democratically run, just like everything else that is at all significant to our planet or to anything at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was, before Trump got elected, I really felt that our world, the United States, was just about in line and ready for both sides to agree that corporations were the problem.
Yeah.
Because even, on the left, I understand why corporations are a problem. I mean, sure. It makes perfect sense on the left. Corporations are a problem because they lobby the government. They control things with money. Money is all power, and they basically exploit people.
Well, I think the right has a problem with that, too.
On the right, corporations should have a big problem with people on the right because of free market, because of monopolies and basically keeping the little guy out. Everything, I think we've discussed this on here, everything has big in front of it now. You can't start any sort of business, larger business, without massive regulations that are stopping you from starting a business. There's not regulations on how you get to do and what you get to do. There's regulations on you just getting started in the first place.
Well, so do you think that every corporation should be a co-op?
No, I'm actually not opposed to it depends on what big business is considered. I'm opposed to massive conglomerates, but I mean a big business.
So you would be in favor of limiting the size of companies, but not changing their overall structure. Is that fair to say?
I'm a big fan of enforcing antitrust and monopoly laws. Absolutely.
Right. Okay. Well, then, so I wouldn't call you a socialist.
No, I'm definitely not.
You believe in private, private property.
Well, I am a private business owner, and I do hope to own land. One of my dreams in life is to dig a hole and know that I own that nothing.
Yeah. Well, private property, I don't have a problem. In socialist theory, which is not the way people use the actual words, there's a distinguishment between private property and personal property. Basically, personal property is what you're using, right? If you have a toothbrush, if it's in your house, if you live in a house, you own the house, you own the toothbrush, you own everything in it. But if, for instance, you own this house and you own another house that you're charging rent on, in a system with no private property, you can't own that. You can't own anything you're not using, basically. So, which I think is a good idea. Although, obviously, you can see how it would become nebulous at the edges. You can see how there would be lots of, exceptions and stuff. And this is just the theory. Like, obviously, it gets much more complex when you get
Yeah. I mean, I could easily sit here and poke holes in it, and you would go, well, I'm not sure how we would figure that out. But frankly, I could do that with the current government we're running. And,
right.
So, I'm just running conceptually. I'm not running argument.
Right. But so, yeah, those are sort of the key tenets of socialism. And it sounds like that's not really where you are. It sounds like you're more keep stuff the same, just don't be so darn corrupt about it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Well, I think a better world starts with not being so darn corrupt about it. Right. I think everything else will fall into place with education and with morality and stuff like that. And I don't mean Jesus morality or religious morality. I mean morality of citizenship, that my neighbor is next to me, my neighbor is the second best guardian of my home, and I need to be aware of that. My neighbor needs to be aware of that. And regardless of what kind of food they cook or what they look like, we need to realize that our neighbor and I are obviously not all that different. We live in the same kind of home, in the same town, work in the same kinds of jobs in the same world. Sure, maybe there might be religious and spice differences, but outside of that, there really aren't that many differences.
Dirty human lovers.
Right. So I have a hard time putting myself into a box. The only reason why I associate heavily with the left as opposed to the right is social liberties. I believe that, any person should be allowed to do whatever they want as long as they're not harming another person. You can even harm yourself. I think I believe in the full legalization of drugs. I think I believe in...
so do I, definitely.
The full legalization of just about anything. And I don't think that religion is, one of my big problems in this country. And everybody says, oh, this country was founded on God. Every country was founded on God in 300 years ago,
or 7,000 years ago.
Every country, like literally every country, that if you're an American, basically part of the agreement to be a citizen of the United States is that it's United States first, then your religion. Now that's going to piss a lot of people off, but the idea that you're going to let other people in and then try to tell them to be different, don't get me wrong, you got to follow the laws. I think ultimately this is terrible. A lot of people this is going to piss them off, but I think I'm a globalist in the sense that I think all people should have the same freedoms. I'm all about America. I totally support America. I want to make America a better place. Whether it's a crap hole now or the greatest place ever, you always want to make it a better place. It's the place where you're from. But I also care about the way women are treated in Iran. If I'm going to sit here and say that I only care about myself and I don't care the way their governments go, I am a globalist. I do think that the people in Iran should have the same freedoms that we have here.
Yeah,
and I
guess
think that
I would
should
agree.
Be a goal of us. Now, I don't think we need to militarily do it.
Right. I think exporting freedom militarily in ways that coincidentally make massive bucks for American corporations and don't really make anything for the actual people is not great. But I think in theory there is a way to do this, and I would call myself a globalist too, because I think socialism can't be full socialism unless every country is socialist, basically.
Right.
Which is, fine, but there's always going to be hierarchies, capitalist contradictions, that kind of thing that seep into socialism if you have to deal with capitalist countries.
See, I don't see socialism as really being an option because we haven't solved the corruption evil factor yet. I see that creating narrow pathways to leadership for shady shit.
Well, I'm not a Stalinist. I mean, I don't...
Well, no, I get that. I'm just saying...
Socialism doesn't have to be heavy-handed government committees decide everything. Socialism... Personally, if I were redesigning the U.S. from the ground up, I would, do the economic reforms I mentioned before, but I would get rid of Congress and just have a direct democracy. Everyone votes on literally everything. And, if people are uninformed, then probably the first thing they'll vote to do is give themselves more time to figure stuff out. And give themselves.
What about the Constitution? Would you get rid of?
I hate the Constitution. I get rid of it. Who cares?
Yeah, but you can't. A direct democracy without a line drawn in the sand is very, very dangerous.
I mean, you would have a constitution. You would just not have the Constitution.
I see. Okay.
I mean, you would have rules. You would have a Bill of Rights, which is the thing that I do like about the Constitution. We have a great Bill of Rights. I think,
we just
would have stuff like that. Right. You would have executives. You would have courts. None of that stuff would or should change, in my opinion. I just think we have the technology now to make that we no longer need representatives. And so I think we can all be our own representatives.
This is one thing that frustrates me in these conversations, and I know you get this concept, but I'm going to throw it out there for the audience. One thing that tends to frustrate me in these conversations is what should happen now and what should happen in the future. I'm pretty much coming from the now angle. As far as in the future, I like to refer to myself as a federationalist.
Okay.
Which is basically the governments from Star Trek,
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Which is basically a communism or a socialism. I would like to get to that. That is
literally what I was just describing. Right.
I would totally like to get to that point, but I was thinking more in terms of the now as to what I am. But yeah, I think I agree. In the long run, I think that, well, frankly, I think we're two inventions away from not needing money. Basically, if we figure out perpetual clean energy, and if we figure out how to rearrange atoms to create food out of our crap, those two inventions.
I feel like that's more than two inventions.
No, I don't think we're a huge.
You just don't invent them.
What?
Unlimited clean energy, maybe, or nigh unlimited, but the rearranging atoms, I don't think any indication that we'll be there in less than a century.
Century is not a long time. I think it will take us longer to adjust to that world than it will take us to invent those things.
Maybe.
Because look at this. About 3 years ago, maybe more like 6 years ago, the world was talking about how we might need to cut the work week down to 4 days. And the reason why was inventions were destroying jobs and robots were able to feed people. And people go, there ain't no robots feeding people. Yes, they are. They are milking your cows. They are threshing your fields. Yeah. They are doing your stuff, and they were talking about doing that. And then all of a sudden the world said, no, that would take our money, and then they squashed the concept. But it was a serious concept there for a while.
I don't think of socialism, though, as something that is unfeasible right now. I think of it as something that is maybe politically impossible right now, but it is something that I think could work if people got behind it, basically. And as I said, I believe in democracy. I don't ever want a situation in the United States where you have the Bolsheviks overthrowing the government and telling everyone you must be socialist now.
Right.
If the United States goes socialist, I want it to be because a majority of people decided that that's what they wanted,
Right.
And obviously we're not there yet. I think socialists like myself have to do a lot of rebranding.
Right. Yeah, it is working its way that way, though. It seem to be working that way. All right. So the coronavirus.
Sure. Yes.
What's your initial take on the coronavirus?
That it's bad.
So you think it's real?
I'm anti-coronavirus.
Do you think it's real?
Yes, I think it's real.
All right. But
I
this is one of the things facing the world right now, and there are so many different beliefs, so many different attitudes towards it that.
Right. Well, it's crazy that it's gotten sort of politicized, because in other countries it really hasn't. Well, that's not true. In a lot of Europe, they like to act like they're better, but kind of it's politicized there too. But like in Asia,
is that a microaggression against Europeans, Kara?
Screw Europe. They're awful.
All right.
No, they're fine. I'm just riling them up for
literally
their
no
reason.
Swimsuits, though. Yeah. All right.
What was I saying? No, I think it's real. I think it's bad, and I think right now our discourse is save lives, save the economy, and there's a lot of like, well, if you don't save the economy, people will die anyway. First of all, not necessarily. Like death rates probably didn't actually even rise during the Great Recession. There's this idea people have, well, if the economy tanks, people will starve to death. Well, no, not really. We have social safety nets. People's lives will be destroyed, but they probably won't die. Whereas coronavirus has killed, 140,000. But more to the point, it's framed as this choice between economy and lives, and I think that is silly, because if we just open everything up and everyone goes back to work, there will be so many dead that there won't be much of an economy anyway.
Right.
So I think what we're doing now in our sort of half-assed way, I don't know if I can say that on radio, but it doesn't matter. Well, yeah, we'll figure it out. Is really the only course. I think these lockdowns are necessary. The people who are skirting them, who are flouting the rules, are really only going to be hurting themselves down the line. Well, and also a lot of other people.
Well, you probably don't know this, but for the past 2 weeks, I have been on a very, very extreme diet because my doctor tells me I am playing with fire. I have high blood pressure, I'm pre-diabetic, and I have just about the highest numbers of cholesterol that most people I know have ever seen.
Okay.
And so now my diet entails, it's mainly spinach with some other stuff.
So you're trapped in your house and you can only eat spinach.
Right. So I'm going to come out the other end of this coronavirus. But the point of all of this is that I am one of those people that if I were to get coronavirus, I am likely to die from. Right. I'm one of those people with the pre-existing conditions. And while I am incredibly unhealthy, or at least was up until 2 weeks ago, lost 9 pounds in 2 weeks. I am not shockingly any worse than a lot of Americans,
absolutely.
I think that the big issue with coronavirus is that none of us feel any civic duty. We don't feel a civic duty to our towns, to our states, to our countries. Sure, we're willing to talk crap. I moved up here to Oregon. Man, Oregonians hate Californians. They just hate them. And apparently that's the case through a lot of states because Californians are moving there with all their money and blowing stuff up. I don't remember having that much money to ruin the Oregon economy, but apparently maybe some people do. But there is no... There's that private... And I'm not talking about Oregon specifically right now, but there is no camaraderie between people. People are really willing to hate. They're really willing to point out what they don't like. I'd like to think that there's a bunch of silent masses who are loving and supportive.
Yeah.
But the squeaky wheel gets the grease, it's
honestly, I don't feel like you can... Our society is structured on every level to encourage competition. Our society is an every man for themselves ideal down to the very core. And, people are raised in that culture. And right now, I really don't blame people who are, refusing to wear masks just because, they're willing to let other people die in order to not mildly inconvenience themselves. Because this was predictable. Those people are victims of the system that made them think that way. And you can't just expect them to be other than what they are suddenly. Where I put the blame for pretty much everything on coronavirus, apart from the fact that it was always going to be awful because it's just a bad thing, is basically on the government for doing nothing. I think the government needed to say, this is a new situation. Here are the new rules. We're paying you all to stay home. Things are going to work differently until this virus is over. But they did not want to do that. They didn't want to take it seriously. And there's no free market solution to coronavirus. You can't laissez-faire your way out of this. The government needed to step up, and they did. So that's where I put the blame.
Right. That was one of my sad realizations. So, my day job is doing SEO and writing content and stuff like that. And one of the rules on the internet is that you're not supposed to write above an 8th grade level so that you can build that.
Sure.
And, my wife and I were talking about how she said that, she's really irritated that everybody's hating on Fauci, going well, he lied and he didn't know and he told us all this stuff and he didn't know. And she's just all, novel is right in the name. Why didn't they just call it new or unknown so that when he tried to answer questions, people knew that he was answering about something unknown? She felt that the use of the word novel alienated a lot of people's understanding of what the doctors were trying to tell us.
To be fair, I don't think a lot of people know that that's actually what it's called. I think they think it's called coronavirus.
Well, yeah, so's the common cold. It's a coronavirus.
Right, yeah.
But
I don't think anything we've said, though, just now would probably be controversial to anyone except the people who turned us off as soon as I said socialist in the last segment. I think everyone who's still listening is on board,
Well, thank you both.
I think it's
sticking around.
It's very much the only people for whom any of this is a problem is essentially the ultra far right, who do not believe anything. I don't know.
I'm hoping to put it out there so that they can understand, and maybe we can understand too. Because I don't
think they will ever change their minds.
Why do you think a lot of people? Why do you think a lot of people don't believe in the coronavirus?
I think because, well, for a couple of reasons. I think if Trump had said this is a serious problem, this is a big deal. Actually, no, it really is just one reason. I think it's because Trump downplayed it initially, and they are in a cult. And he is their cult leader.
You really think that?
I think if Trump had taken it seriously, then so his supporters would be also. There would be no anti-maskers. There would be no movement along that line. You would still have a few hardcore types like the anti-vaxxers and stuff who, are pro-infectious disease, I guess. But and they would have always been a problem, but there aren't really that many of them. I think the bulk of the people we're having problems with now are people who just believe Trump always, no matter what he says. And he didn't take it seriously, so they won't either.
Okay, well, he is the president. He is the leader of this country.
Okay.
So can you understand why people would think that? Can they?
Yeah, but these are the same people who hated Obama, hated him with every fiber of their being. These people aren't well, he's my president and he says this. They don't respect the office of the president. They respect Trump because he's their guy.
Yeah. He tells it like it is, though.
Right. They like Trump because they've supported him this far. They like Trump for a lot of reasons. But the point is, if anyone who's still on the Trump train now will never get off.
So you think they have Stockholm syndrome?
Yeah, they're in a cult. Like I said, I think this is actually a textbook cult. It's just really big.
Okay. Well, let's try this one. What's your take on cancel culture?
Cancel culture. Well, I'm of a couple minds about this.
Yeah.
I think the Twitter mob is not great at collecting all the facts before they decide to swarm a person and abuse them. I think, someone says something that's kind of homophobic or something, like maybe not even intending to. This is just an example. There's no real life thing connected to this. Maybe they're not even intending to, but they word something badly. Someone says, hey, that was homophobic. It gets, other people hear about it third hand to hear, oh, did you hear that this person is a homophobe? And then suddenly all these people on Twitter murder them for being a homophobe. Even though they're not a homophobe, they just said something that they didn't think through, which we all do because we all come to every minority group with bad assumptions just because of the culture we live in. It's stuff you have to unlearn, and it's a messy process. Right. So on that level, I think that's a huge problem, and I think it's not necessarily cancel culture, but Twitter being garbage. But on the other hand, a lot of the people who I think the Twitter mob does actually get it right most of the time. And I think a lot of the people who are complaining about cancel culture right now, these are some of the wealthiest and most influential people in the world. They have a massive platform, and they're complaining because people were being mean to them on Twitter when like they have so much power. Like, I have a hard time feeling much sympathy.
Yeah, I hate it when rich people complain about it.
Like when Ricky Gervais comes on and is like, "Oh, you can't make jokes anymore as a comedian." I'm like, it's just a little hard to take from someone who's so rich, so famous, and like people are still going to his shows. Right. So I think cancel culture is a serious problem for like up and coming artists and public figures and stuff. I think, if you have a popular YouTube channel, I think cancel culture can be a horrible problem for you. But on the other hand, I think cancel culture, the big celebrities, they need to get over it. And, frankly, most of the big celebrities I've heard about who have been canceled for very good reasons when you look into it. So it's like, right. Yeah.
I've had a problem with cancel culture because as a child of the 90s, I'm not a child of the 90s, but I went to high school 1990 to 94, or at least I should have. And and through the 90s, there was this head-on mockery of racism was one way that, and sexism and homophobia was one way that society faced these things head on. And a lot of people were mocking it by using it. And I know that it's confusing to people in this day.
No, I get it. It's sarcasm.
And I think a lot of people in my age bracket had to either reprogram or go to the other side. And I've found myself having to reprogram. I mean, surely you've heard me say an offensive thing or two.
Yeah, nothing springs to mind, but I'm sure I have.
I have an offensive sense of humor, and I think it's my my 90s-ness. And I think we have a lot of 40-somethings in this country, and I think a lot of them are going to the other side because they aren't willing to change. They're so offended by being called the bad guy that they figure I might as well become the bad guy.
Right. Well, there's also sort of a thing where, the alt-right, them, the Nazis who live on the internet.
Sure.
Like, one of the big tactics they use to recruit is, and this is generally something they do with like 13-year-old boys who are edgy and not very bright yet, is sort of spread racist jokes and stuff in their spaces, and then get these people who don't know any better to bring these same jokes into other spaces where they are, horribly berated for what they've said, because usually it's awful, and then they are driven even further into the Nazi web. This is a deliberate tactic, and I think the left does need to be more understanding of, like, the guy saying this racist joke is probably 13,
For sure.
That we, there's a grace period a little bit.
Well, even beyond that,
it's so hard to tell the difference. Yeah, absolutely. Like, if someone says something horrible and then they say, wait, I didn't mean it, here's what I mean, they should be forgiven, of course, always. And that's a big problem with cancel culture right now too, is people hear the initial thing, they don't hear the apology, and the abuse continues forever.
Right. But how far does that forgiveness go? Let's take a case like Louis C.K.
Okay. Yeah.
Is forgiveness an option for him?
Well, in a lot of cases, I'm thinking about people who have said something offensive rather than sexually victimized other human beings.
Right, but I'm not entirely sure Louis C.K. was aware that he was sexually victimizing people. Sure.
I mean, I think...
Don't get me wrong.
No,
it's shady as all hell. It's totally shady. I'm not okay with Louis C.K. But I'm just saying that I don't think...
No, I get what you're saying, and that's kind of a tricky case. Personally, like, I would forgive him, but I wouldn't tell anyone else that they have to, Right. If you're a sexual assault survivor, you don't have to uncancel Louis C.K.,
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's fair. Yeah, fair answer. What about, like, forced diversity? So I'm online the other day, and one of the comic book guys I follow ends up, he got in some sort of fight online, or not a fight. He said something, and something called Comicsgate was coming after him. Apparently, Comicsgate is people who are upset about forced diversity in comic books. With all the heroes getting changed to black or Latino or women, and retiring old characters, bringing in new ones, and they feel that forced diversity is ruining comic books. This is why I'm on the topic now. It's happening everywhere, arguably.
Yeah, unlike with cancel culture, I don't think those people have a point. I think people are very used to seeing white people, men, straight people, and they're seeing some minorities on the screen. They're seeing some minorities in their comic book for the first time, and they're freaking out.
Right.
But it's literally, this hurts no one. And it's not like it leads to worse stories. Like, they're saying it is, but it really objectively doesn't. And like these, I don't know. Maybe you identify with the story less because it is not, the 900th thing about a straight white guy who is similar to you. Maybe, you feel uncomfortable having to read about people with different experiences, but like, push through that discomfort.
Right.
That's part of being alive, and we've had a forced lack of diversity for all of history.
Well, what do you think the fear is? I mean, if everybody's not a card-carrying racist.
I think they are. Well, not card-carrying, but I think this is a debate that stems entirely from unconscious prejudice. I think there's no real debate here. I think it's basically a lot of people who really don't understand that they have prejudiced views inside them, and it makes them uncomfortable.
Yeah,
they need to fix themselves. The problem is not comics. The problem is them. This is what I would say.
So you think that the underlying issue with anybody having an issue with their things being changed is
racism, sexism, whatever. Yes, I'm making that blanket statement.
Yeah, that's fine. The only issue.
I mean, what do you think?
Well, the only issue that I've ever had is that I am a 45-year-old white guy.
Sure.
So at best on television, I tend to, I get portrayed a lot Not at best, of course. At best, I mean, I understand we're the mainstream. But more and more, I'm getting portrayed on television as being a stupid oaf.
Okay. But what about things like John Wick,
As a racist child molester. Yeah, no, that's I understood that at first, and I get mistaken for that a lot. But for John Wick on the streets. No,
that's what I mean.
No,
that's
I get
what I mean, though.
I precursor to.
There's a lot of people who are your age, who are your demographic group, who are, they're super hot because it's TV or movies or whatever. They're not like you and me, but neither is the very scarce lesbian representation I see on screen.
Right. Yeah. It just hurts my feelings to see it happen, and it creates a sort of fear and a feeling in me. I'm not justifying.
Yeah.
it. I'm not justifying
I get that.
it. I'm just explaining the feeling. The feeling.
Well, I think there's nothing wrong with the feeling. I think people are looking outward when they should be looking inward. And I think you're handling this in a mature way. I think not everyone is.
Well, what about a world that makes like jokes about the way white people are?
I think that's generally fine until we reach a point where white people legitimately don't have it any better than anyone else.
So you're allowed to make fun of
and at that point, the jokes become bad. Yes. You are allowed to make fun of anyone who's in charge. Always speak truth.
For their race.
Yes. I think so. Yes. I think that is. I think one can overindulge. I think, there's nothing necessarily laudable about that. But I think, for instance, black people have blown off steam by saying, white people are like this for a long time. And you know what? We have it coming, right? Considering everything we've done to them, we can take a little bit of ribbing.
Now, if I grew
the
up
absolute least we can do.
If I grew up and lived in Atlanta my whole life, could I be going around saying black people be like this?
Well, that's kind of up to you. Like, people don't know.
On an acceptable level.
People don't know by looking at
how large of a macrocosm or microcosm.
No, I get it. And this is sort of the Quentin Tarantino situation, who I believe, I forget where he grew up, but it was in a predominantly black place, and he sort of grew up enmeshed in sort of black culture, and yet a lot of people still like have a problem with him. His characters writing, him acting people saying the N-word, him writing people saying the N-word. People have a problem with that, even though arguably that's part of his culture. But like, he's a white guy, so. Honestly, I don't know. I'm not like, I can't be the arbiter of this. No. I understand. I'm just picking your brain. I don't. No. I get that.
That does bring me to a good question.
The answer I'm telling you is I really don't know when it gets kind of murky like that. It's
I don't know. It's a totally acceptable answer. But people having a problem with Tarantino writing the N-word is a weird one. Right. So basically.
And it's not that many people,
If I wrote a story that had that sort of subject matter in it, I couldn't write the N-word. It creates this weird, like Mark Twain. Was he allowed to write the N-word? He was obviously a white dude, did all right for himself.
I think this moves into sort of the topic of cultural appropriation, which is something that's gotten really bastardized, I think, by white allies who don't even understand what the issue was originally.
Right.
So there's a lot of white
appropriation.
There's a sort of mainstream thought. You can't write about other races. You can't, or sexualities or whatever. You can't discuss their issues. You can't be involved at all if that's not you. And that is never what the people who originated the idea of cultural appropriation were saying. Mm. What they were saying is stuff like, I'm a Native American. I make these blankets. I make these designs. They belong to my people. They've been sacred for all these centuries. No one buys my blankets because they get the same designs from a big corporation run by white people.
Right.
at its very inception, cultural appropriation was basically an argument about intellectual property and the fact that people, and an argument about money, more to the point. They don't have a problem with the fact that this corporation is selling these things. They have a problem with the fact that because these corporations are selling these things, they do not get what is due to them.
Right.
So this is originally what it is. And it's really gotten turned into a conversation about, you can only do things that are allowed to your specific race. And that's stupid. That's never what was meant. White people, wear your dreadlocks. It's fine. But there are a lot of spaces like where black people are not allowed to wear dreadlocks, where black people are not allowed to wear their hair, the way it is. And in those same spaces, white people are. Like that has been a thing in a lot of companies, sort of things. And that's another thing people were complaining about. The issue is not the white person with the dreadlocks. The issue is the double standard. The issue is, people of color not getting what is owed to them for their stuff, Well,
I wish more people understood that, because, if you went back to 4000 BC, I can guarantee you just about every white dude had dreadlocks.
Really?
So it is in their culture too. Not a lot of hairbrushes 4000 BC.
Okay, 4000 BC, yeah.
We've been
Viking
human
era
beings on this planet in our general form for conservatively 150,000 years,
Yeah.
There was a lot
I
of
feel once you get into Mesopotamia and stuff, there's definitely a fair amount of grooming that happens.
Yeah, but you're looking at the royalty, man.
The common people bathed, they groomed. No, they did. They actually did. People have this idea that the poor were dirty, unwashed peasants. It's actually not the case. But that's a whole separate topic.
All right. Okay, so what about these riots/protests?
Riot/protests. Well, that's a hard one. I'm of a couple minds about this. First of all, the Housing Act of 1968, one of the most significant pieces
technical now.
One of the most significant pieces of civil rights legislation ever after the Voting Rights Act of 1964 was pushed through Congress like 2 weeks after MLK's death because of the intense rioting that happened. Congress was like, we have to throw these people a bone. So it is definitely historically fair to say if people had not rioted then, we would not have gotten this incredibly important piece of legislation, or at least we wouldn't have gotten it then. We wouldn't have got it. Might have been watered down. Who knows? So I think riots have proven themselves historically to be a good tool to change things quickly in a way that
it's obviously lit a fire in the tailpipe of the world that we're currently
in. As cities, states, etc., all around have changed things very quickly. And this was not on their agenda pre-George Floyd. They were not always planning to make police brutality an issue that required the expenditure of some of their political capital in 2020. This is the case because of the rioters and protesters.
Right.
Now, I think it would be nice if peaceful protests could make the news the same way that riots did.
Yeah,
but they don't. No, it isn't, because people, really, if people feel no sense of pressure, if people don't feel like something has to change, then what is the point of a demonstration? What is the point of a protest if it puts no pressure on anyone? At the end of the day, you have to hurt someone to
get there
change. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I was watching something by Trevor Noah, and he was basically saying that protests aren't meant to make anybody feel comfortable. They're meant to make people feel uncomfortable.
It's the exact opposite. It's like, we're uncomfortable. We are going to make you uncomfortable until you solve the problem. because we can't solve the problem because we are disenfranchised.
Now, do you think this level of protesting and rioting would be going on if everybody was back at work?
No. I think that is one of the horrible things about our ultra-capitalist system in our country is that it prevents people from standing up for their rights because they're just too exhausted.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
I think COVID, because, there have been protests in the past on the same exact topic. Think about Trayvon Martin.
Over and over. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, but the reason it's different now, I think, is because people have been protesting in Portland for 50 days. You can't do that when the economy's, normal. Like, you have to go to your job. You can't protest all day for 50 days. Well, not all day, but like every night. So it's created an opportunity for change, and I would optimistically hope that this would also spur a conversation about, a 4-day work week, about cutting back and allowing people more time. But realistically, the people in power will take the exact opposite takeaway, which is that once this COVID thing is over, we need to squeeze people's free time even more.
Well, yeah, because our economy works off of money moving.
Right.
That's the way the economy works. As money moves around. That's why people don't like the ultra rich sitting on all the money.
Right.
Yeah. So what about defunding the police? This is a term that I feel really, once again, is a problem with the vocabulary in our country.
Well, it is and it isn't. It's a term that's sort of gotten co-opted by centrists to mean stop over-policing Black communities, which I think is a good thing. But defund the police is a cry that began on the far left, and it means defund the police. It means have no more police departments. I don't know how I feel about that, mainly because I haven't really done the research about the far left idea. How I feel about stop over policing Black communities is, yes, obviously we should have stopped doing that a long, long time ago. But so it's taken on two meanings. It has its original far left meaning, and it has its more palatable, slightly sort of center left meaning now. That's sort of co-opted the conversation. But yeah.
Well, I think the co-opted attitude is a good one. That's probably going to piss a lot of people off. And that's my problem with the term defund.
Well, it was not originally a term that was intended to be palatable to.
Right. I think we need to reallocate funds. Up until all of this happened, police were complaining that they would get called about domestic disturbances over and over that were nonviolent, that they were getting called about dogs. Why are you calling the police about a dog? I think those funds should be reallocated to things that address those problems.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then the militarization of police, that was a weird one that they were militarized after 9/11.
Yeah.
And then here they are using it in other situations. So should they be militarized? Maybe they should. But they should probably have some limitation on when and where they use it.
I think what's happening right now in, Portland and soon to be other cities is, obviously I don't like Trump, but he's a crazy person. Other people put him in power, and the leaders before him failed to anticipate that there might be a crazy person in power. I blame.
Did he pass that test with the elephant?
Sure. I put the blame for this Portland situation on George Bush and on Congress. In 2000, many of them Democrats. I blame them for passing the Patriot Act, for creating the Department of Homeland Security, for creating the legal framework for this madness that they should have anticipated could be used by an unfit leader to create an authoritarian nightmare, which is exactly what's happening.
So you do feel that we're pushing our way towards some sort of dictatorship.
I think unless something changes in the polls, that Trump is going to lose in November and that we're going to move back towards the middle. But I hope that whoever comes after Trump, it takes notices from this, shoot, we need to put some restrictions on some of this crazy stuff. We need to pare down the Patriot Act. We need to pare down the Department of Homeland Security. We need to make, tighter rules about who you can appoint to be attorney general, who you can fire. We need to codify some of this stuff because I think it's demonstrated the danger, and I think we really need to act on it.
Well, the two most famous presidents in United States history are famous for the exact same reason, and that is that when they had absolute power, they gave it up.
Sure.
Both Washington and Lincoln did this.
Right.
That's
I assumed you meant FDR.
No, Washington and Lincoln.
Yeah, Washington and Lincoln
had absolute power, had the option of taking absolute power, and didn't do it. I mean, Lincoln to the point where he still even held an election during a civil war.
Yeah,
that's pretty hardcore. So this last one's going to be an interesting one.
Well, wait, I want to hear what you think about the protest.
How do I feel about the protests?
Yeah.
I feel that they're a necessary symptom to a problem. Do I think that there's a lot of crappy people out there taking advantage of the situation? I absolutely do. But I think more good than harm is coming from the situation, although that's not necessarily a great argument for something to be okay because, I think the ends justify the means is a scary attitude to live by.
Sure.
But no, I think protests are a part of American life and should be and always should have been and should continue to be. Now, we do live in a world where again, there's not a lot of citizenship or civility to the point where there are a lot of people running outside of these lines and a lot of people watching it and not doing anything about it, either due to fear for their own safety or apathy. There are also quite a bit of people doing things about it. My family had an interesting eye-opening thing during the protests. If you watch the news, everybody says the news, the left and the right, or CNN's leftist and Fox is rightist. And I don't believe either of those are the case. I believe both of them are sensationalists and they know who their market is.
Yeah.
So they pander to their market with
they're corporatist.
Right. And so during the protests, we started watching Facebook feeds on our TV of people actually walking in the protests, and standing outside of the burning buildings and, all sorts of stuff. And it was a lot less scary than the news would have.
Yeah, it's a pretty different story.
Yes, it was a very different story. So,
yeah.
So, I'm 70-30, 70% protest and 30% against rioting. And that might just be a necessary evil to the situation. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like rioting, there's only certain issues where I feel like rioting is like allowable to change things, to take it to that level. I think it's perfectly justifiable here because like blacks have been disproportionately killed for, many, many decades, a long time, and no one is doing anything about it. 100%. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think there were other problems that probably took the forefront for a lot of those years, but yeah, so I think in this situation, the issue was violence. The violence was the people who perpetrated it originally were the police. And so I think it is allowable to meet that with some level of violence. But I think if
most people would say that if somebody's going to kill your child should fight back.
Sure. Yeah. So I think violence is allowable in protests when what is at issue is violence, I think. But that doesn't apply to every issue, right? Yeah, I think in a roundabout way it is self-defense. But if you're talking about, like these people who were protesting because they didn't want to wear masks. No violence has been done to these people. Therefore, if their protests have turned violent, which they didn't, that would not have been justified, in my view.
They sure came armed, though.
They did, yeah, and, whatever, I guess. I think they looked kind of dumb, but that is probably mainly because of how I feel about their position.
Right.
So,
Okay, so my final topic is a weird one and probably the most touchy one. Maybe not the most touchy, but the most, whatever. Reparations.
Oh, yeah, we were talking about this.
Yeah, we've talked about reparations. Mm-hmm. What's your take on reparations?
I think any form of, whether you have like hardcore reparations where you're saying, we're gonna tax white people and give a stipend to black people. Whether you're doing that or whether you're just having sort of affirmative action, whether you're funding better housing, whether you're funding, more opportunities, whether you're giving grants to people, whether you're doing it in a blatant way or a subtle way, any progress on the issue of civil rights, and I'm using black people as an example, but obviously there are lots of groups, has to be reparations at some level. Otherwise, it's just lip service. If there's no money moving around, then no problem is being solved. Because the problem at its very root, I think, is generational wealth disparities that were created by, things in the past that have not been addressed. So I think hardcore reparations, obviously that's very politically unpalatable, but I think...
And when you say hardcore, just to clarify for the audience, I think she means when she says hardcore reparations, she means directly taking money from one group and giving it to the other.
Yes, I think that's maybe not the best idea because it's, so unpalatable. But it's a bad idea in practice, not in principle. I think any solution to the problem of generational wealth disparity is going to essentially be that, just with extra steps.
Well, yeah, no, it's just going to be, because I've had a hard time with reparations because I don't believe in taking money from one to just straight hand across to the other. I don't think that that's a practical thing because I don't think it will solve anything.
I think it would solve the problem. I just think it would create other problems.
Much bigger problem.
Well, we can agree on that. And the bigger problem would be in the form of
more racist,
white supremacists, recruiting, gaining a lot more people.
But I mean, it's reparations in the sense that I take one competitive circle with 10 people and put 10 more people in it.
Sure.
So now we have a competitive circle of 10 people or 20 people. I totally agree with that. I agree that to make sure that, and again, I think a lot of this starts with education. I don't know how the world went to war against education because they think, all these people always have this attitude like, oh man, they're sending my kid to a liberal college and my kid's going to get all brainwashed and become a super liberal. And I'm just all, well, would that happen to you if you had gone there? They're all, no, I'm too smart for that. I'm all, but your kid's stupid as hell, right? It's like they don't have a lot of confidence in other people, but they sure got a lot of confidence in themselves, I think education in general it is my solution to the world. My reparations problem with diversity around this world, I think I came up with an answer, and I think we need to pay people to move to other parts of the country.
Yeah, that could do it. But, where's the money going to come from? Here's the thing. Right.
Yeah.
And ultimately, because we have progressive taxation, that's going to come from wealthier people who are mostly white. Eventually it becomes reparations because there is a disparity, and you have to address the disparity.
Well, I understand that, but
so I would agree. I don't
think that the government should be looking at people when they tax them as being black or white. I think we're taking a dollar from everybody. one thing I'm offended by the government is that they view my wife and I as a different type of entity because we're married. I mean, if anything,
I think that's
the world should view me as a lone individual. It should be the government.
Yeah. No, I completely agree.
I think
although
it's
also
that I get or lose anything for being married.
Like, personally, I think if you have less than $1 million, you should never pay the government anything in federal taxes ever. Like, because most of our country's wealth is people who are millionaires and above, literally 80%. So it's, I don't think there's any justification for ever taxing anyone who's not a millionaire.
All right. So you heard it here on Radio Wasteland. The answer is eat the rich.
Yes.
Yeah. That's your answer.
That's my answer to pretty much everything, really. Like, it's a very versatile answer.
If I had an answer, my answer would be free, reformatted so that it was highly effective education for everybody from the age of 0 to 18.
Yeah. Well, that costs money. And that money, statistically, is going to come from white people.
Yes, but smart people, educated people, especially
I'm not saying I disagree.
World.
I'm just saying that's essentially reparations.
I'm arguing for the audience. Is smart, educated people in a technological world make the future? And we can either be a country that imports the future or exports it. And, I think we probably need to get... It's weird that we're the richest country in the world, yet we have, we're way low down on the education system.
Yeah. Well, I completely agree. So,
all right. Better education.
We can all take that away. Yes.
All right. You've been listening to Radio Wasteland. If you're offended, write
Kill us.
Write your congressman.
Oh.
Yep.
Literally attack us in our homes. That's Chauncey and Kara.
Welcome to the radio.